Breaking K-pop news update. There are nights that are simply part of a tour. Then there are those rare nights that suddenly change the course of the global conversation. And what happened in El Paso that day wasn't just a concert. It was a turning point. Something even the most devoted fans didn't see coming. Heat permeated the air, not just from the weather, but from the emotions of the thousands packed into the stadium. Everything felt routine at first. The lights were on as usual. The opening music was blaring. Tens of thousands of fans were ready for the second day. Nothing seemed different until the giant screen captured a single figure and the entire atmosphere changed instantly. No dramatic effects. No over-the-top spotlights, just a calm gaze, thin glasses, and a red microphone moving slowly to his lips. Kim Taehyung appeared on screen like a shadow, not intending to command attention, but that's precisely why he created an explosion. In a single second, the initially noisy stadium erupted into hysterics. Not the usual clamor, not the standard concert screams. This was a wave that ricocheted, swelled, pressing against the chests of everyone in the venue. And strangely, the reaction never subsided. Every time the camera returned to him, it was as if the same button was pressed over and over again, making the stadium roar like a giant siren that wouldn't stop. But what made that night truly insane wasn't just the response in the stands. The world outside was also on fire. Within minutes, videos of 5 seconds, 10 seconds, or even just a single cold look caught on camera spread at an almost unbelievable rate. Thousands of views turned into millions. Taehyung's already big name suddenly dominated global trends like an unstoppable hurricane. Not a local trend, not a fandom trend, but a trend that jumped from one country to another without stopping. As this unfolded, one thing intrigued many. HYBE remained silent. No clarification, no response, no visible headlines. Yet it was precisely that silence that fueled speculation. In the entertainment industry, silence isn't slow. Silence is strategy. And HYBE's silence that night sounded too neat, too coordinated, too observing something. As fans dissected the clip, observers began to notice something even more interesting. HYBE's official post-concert content was suddenly released earlier than usual. The visuals were sharper, the camera work felt more focused, and Taehyung's moments were given more space than usual. Was this a coincidence? Or had someone already realized that this was no ordinary night? Because one thing a large company like HYBE never misses is data. And the data from that night was abnormal. Engagement soared. Interactions skyrocketed. People outside the fandom joined the conversation, and various platforms' algorithms began recommending everything related to him. This phenomenon wasn't just a fleeting virality. What was happening closely resembled what's called a second wave, a phase where content not only rises but continues to grow, sharpened by reactions, analysis, theories, and mass discussion. And at the center of that wave, Taehyung stood without changing a single aspect of his performance style. He remained calm, remained slow, remained consistent. There were no exaggerated movements, no expressions trying to steal the spotlight. This is precisely where his power emerged, a calm that exploded far louder than any deliberate attempt at drama. What surprised fans was how seemingly small details, the way he turned his head, the way he looked at the camera, the pauses between lines, suddenly felt monumental. Many in the audience reported losing focus on other things due to the inexplicable intensity of the aura. Some felt goosebumps for no apparent reason. Others called it one of the most nerve-wracking moments they'd ever witnessed. And when an emotional experience like this spills beyond the confines of the stadium, the effect magnifies. Media outlets began writing, analysts began taking notice, online commentators exploded, and one question began to emerge everywhere. What exactly happened to Taehyung that night? Could it have been just a lucky break? Or was it the result of something long underway? Or even bigger, was this a sign that a new move was underway? While the theories continued to emerge, HYBE remained watching from a distance. And what made people even more convinced that something bigger was brewing was the quiet but swift pattern that usually precedes major projects, international collaborations, or new promotional strategies. Many analysts believe that cross-market appeal like this rarely occurs without major repercussions. When a single name is able to organically drive global attention, companies don't sit idly by. They take stock, they watched, and they prepared. The day after the incident, digital platforms shifted like new terrain. Keywords previously tied to concerts, cities, or events suddenly shifted to a single name. Algorithms moved as if they knew something humans hadn't yet said. Content that hadn't even received attention months before now reappeared on the timelines of people who hadn't followed Taehyung's journey. It was like a magnet pulling everything back to one point, forming a larger narrative that no one had initially planned. Fans began to notice another pattern. Reactionary videos from foreign creators began to emerge. Those previously unfamiliar with K-pop, or only superficially familiar with it, were now drawn into the same world, trying to understand why one figure could spark such a stir. Music analysts dissected his vocals. Cinematographers examined the way the camera captured his face. Psychologists highlighted how microexpressions could influence mass perception. And most interestingly, all of these analyses converged on the same phrase. This aura isn't fake. This isn't a normal performance. Meanwhile, discussions within the fandom shifted from mere fan outcry to serious conversations about the emerging pattern. They noticed how HYB reorganized the content release schedule. They noted how certain thumbnails featured Taehyung's close-ups more frequently than before. They noticed how Korean media outlets began including his name on trending global influencer lists, something that rarely happens without some behind-the-scenes influence. And this brings us to a more interesting phenomenon: Taehyung's silence. While the world was in flames, he continued to perform in the following days with the same rhythm, calm, measured, without the urgency that should arise when the spotlight begins to shift. This is where the public began to see something deeper. His silence wasn't weakness, it was gravity. The less he reacted, the stronger the world's response. Some viewers described the sensation as watching someone who wasn't trying to charm, but instead exuded a charm unconsciously. And when the charm is unnoticed by the owner, the world watching is even more captivated. This wasn't an aura created for the camera. It was an aura that persisted even when the cameras were off. This wave of analysis led to one major theory: the possibility that momentum like this doesn't happen twice in an artist's career. This was a moment that only occurs when timing, circumstances, public health, and industry readiness align perfectly. And if HYB truly understood this, they wouldn't have let a wave of this magnitude pass them by. Rumors began to circulate. Speculation about major projects, cross-continental collaborations, and even the possibility of developing a more defined solo image began to emerge. Unnamed industry sources mentioned that several global companies were taking notice of the unusual engagement numbers, not because of the virality, but because of its stability. Virality will ebb and flow. But Taehyung, who should have experienced a decline after the concert, continued to rise. And this is where the story becomes far more complex. Because a phenomenon that rises not because of scandal, not because of controversy, and not because of massive promotions, but simply because of an artist's natural performance and aura, is the kind of phenomenon the global industry most seeks. Authenticity that cannot be engineered. Something that cannot be created through marketing strategies. And in the modern entertainment world, this kind of authenticity is gold, rare, expensive, and extremely dangerous if not handled properly. So, while El Paso was only considered the beginning, the reality was, it was the first spark of a larger fire that is now spreading across the globe. A point that shifted orbits. An accidental moment that ignited something far broader than the confines of a single concert. And now, the question shifts again. If this is the beginning, what is heading our way next?